Wow, the intro for this video is way harder than I've expected it to be, but since I do all videos in one take, I would say let's just get it over with, and I'm not even quite sure why I feel so nervous, but in case you know the meme about the dog that has no idea what he's doing, but he's trying his very best, that's kinda how I feel like at the moment, because I've never done a challenge or a collaboration video or anything like that before, so I'm not quite sure how this works. For all those who don't know me, let me introduce myself real quick, even though that's the last quick thing you will see on this channel. Usually my videos being noticeably longer, not longer than this, but longer in general. But my name is Damir, which is the last time you will actually hear me say out loud my name. I just think it's a weird thing, I just don't like it. But what am I? Well, I'm a YouTuber for almost 5 years, and in tech time, that's a long time, and that's why I kinda get why some of you might disagree with this phone, the OnePlus One being an old phone, but I'll get to that. Now, what's the actual premise of this video? Well, Erica Griffin, I guess all of you know her, I don't have to introduce her, created a challenge for YouTubers, and they should use an old phone, should be at least 2 generations old, and then use it for a week as their daily driver and share the experience with the community. That's exactly what I'm going to do today with the OnePlus One. Even though I know I cheated a little bit, it's not really an old phone. Some of you even still use it as the daily driver, which is totally legit, I get that. But the reason is just I had nothing older that still works, and it actually fits quite well because this was released in 2014 and was my daily driver for half a year. The OnePlus 5T at the moment now, 4 years later, is currently my daily driver. And I have to say, 4 years apart, the difference isn't all that much of a challenge, because you have to see just like it is. Even though 4 years have passed, a lot of things have changed. The general experience, just as a phone, has not changed that much. And the OnePlus One is a very iconic phone. We have to just get a little bit into that before I'm going into the actual challenge and my experience. But for all those who don't know the OnePlus, I don't think I actually have to talk about it, but let's quickly start. It was the first phone, maybe besides the Nexus line back then, that wanted to create a flagship experience, flagship killer back then, for an affordable price. Things have changed by now. A lot of these things have definitely changed, and there was a lot of controversy going on about the OnePlus, how they introduced it with the invitation and all that kind of jazz. I guess this is a thing of the past by now, because things have changed, they have matured, they have improved, but how does this phone work out these days? So here it is, and no, this is not running on stock, this is running actually on the latest Lineage OS, but I want to get into the design first because 2014, and it was pretty much a top of the line phone back then, OnePlus 5T, which is the same thing in 2018, and yet the OnePlus 5T is actually the bigger phone. In terms of width, also not much has really changed. Okay, maybe in terms of thickness, but you would say, okay, 6 inches against 5.5 inches. No, 6 inches with 2x1 on the OnePlus 5T for me is just stretched 5.5 inches, which the OnePlus 5 has. But yeah, this is the OnePlus One. But as you can also see, this was the very first phone with a sandstone finish, the gray one. And now so many years later back, they went to sandstone white, which looks completely different in terms of texture. But they went back to the iconic phone because this phone launched the whole thing, the whole hype of the budget flagship and so on. Now, how does this feel? This feel today? I have to say it still feels nice. It's still quite compact for a 5.5 inch, as you can see. Not even the newer ones changed. The button placement is still good. Not so much a fan of that. And this video from now on will look a little bit more like my actual normal reviews. But yeah, I can do whatever I want. It's my channel. Now, as you can see, the camera is flush. Pretty much, yeah. It feels nice. It still feels quite high quality, even though things have improved over time, especially like the display and sound and so on. But this phone holds up still very well, and that's why I call this challenge kind of cheating, because it definitely wasn't a challenge. The experience was just about as good as on many kind of mid-ranges these days, because bezels, you can't really even see them right now, are a little bit on the bigger side. I get that, and here you can actually see the old smartphone challenge. It begins. We have a notification LED. We have still things like double tap to wake up the screen. We have something that we don't have many times anymore, capacitive buttons, but also the option for on-screen buttons. And about the design, even now, 4 years later, this definitely does not feel dated, and that's why it can't be really called an old phone. It still is pretty much a modern phone, just not quite the newest anymore. And in terms of the display, if we check that real quick, I have to say, I think a few things have to do with the Lineage OS, because when it comes to the display, we have live display here, for example, that gives you different modes, also options to change the color temperature and so on, and the calibration. But out of the box, this display feels very cold, a little bit odd. I would blame maybe Lineage OS for that, because I think a few things are not the way I like them on custom ROMs. Because, okay, the last time that I've used custom ROMs regularly is like 2 years already ago, or even longer. Just as a reviewer, I don't have the time anymore. But the display holds up quite well. It looks a bit different. It's still quite bright. Viewing angles are stable and all. It still holds up. Of course, now we have displays with more clarity, better contrast, better viewing angles and all that. But this will do just fine for many people for a long time. And about the sound, let's actually check this one real quick. Where is my track that I usually take here? Yes, you can see something that was very unique, and I don't know if any other phone ever did this as well. It has actual stereo speakers, not front but down firing, and no, they are not the best ones. There are many ones out there by now that have a bottom firing one that works just as good or actually even better. But back then, that was definitely something nice to see. The speaker obviously isn't the best thing out there. It sounds a little bit thin, not super high quality, but it's still mostly loud enough, and it still does the job just fine. And considering that this phone was used until like a year ago from my brother, not from me anymore, because I handed it down, nice job still. Headphone jack is there. That's something. At least that's a thing for OnePlus that they still keep doing, which is nice to see. The quality is okay. But now let's get actually into the most surprising thing, this phone's performance. Because as you can see, the launch times are still at least on a mid-range level. Maybe just the loading times are a little bit longer because RAM got faster, storage got faster, and I get that. But this is far from slow. There are still many phones at a price that you would have to pay more than this for that don't work out that well. And then the most surprising thing for me is how incredibly smooth this phone still is. Because yes, the Snapdragon 801 back then already was smooth. But usually some phones, the longer you just have them, just don't work as well. The only thing that I've noticed, I think Lineage did something with the scrolling, which is something that I complain on many phones, especially Huawei phones, about. If someone changed that, feels a little bit off, because I've tried side by side with the OnePlus 5, and this just has less friction during scrolling. And as you can see, it feels a little bit more lightweight because of that. Maybe that's what makes the whole phone feel actually lighter than it is, but as you can see, this is very smooth, very lag-free. The multitasking is a little bit weird because this is just a button that switches to the last app, but that's a Lineage OS thing. But otherwise, I have to say, this phone still performs very well. The multitasking, okay, with a long press here, works still incredibly nice. And I guess this phone, where should we put it in these days performance levels? I would say actually in some way above a Snapdragon 630 or so. Very close to a 660, I would say. Of course, it's back then, it was the flagship, the 801. But this is a chip that back then was a little bit ahead of its time, and it aged very well, especially with the optimizations of this whole thing. But I want to get to the battery life real quick because, of course, this is a phone that has been used for 3 years at least. And yeah, quite a few cycles behind it. It definitely doesn't hold up that much because I was at around 3.5 hours in mobile data, maybe like 5 on Wi-Fi, which is definitely below average. I guess most people, if you use a proper custom ROM, tune it perfectly, maybe use a custom kernel, maybe reduce the frequencies or anything like that, could squeeze out even more. But even for someone just normal as me, if I'm not in review mode, if I just use a phone personally, private, this would get me through the day. Of course, it charges a little bit slower. No OnePlus charging yet, some supercharge or something. I would say let's go into the software, and just so we are on the same page, what this is actually running on. It's not the very latest Lineage OS. It was what I installed like a month ago when I started the challenge, but it's running. Yes, this is running 8.10 Lineage OS 15.1 unofficial bacon. This is just pretty much the first kind of stable ROM that I found and just flashed. And it has a lot of nice options. You have button customizations, status bar options, so you definitely get way more. I personally prefer by now just the Oxygen OS, but a lot of nice options. Even though I don't want to get too much into that because you can use pretty much anything on this. And that is the big part about this phone. I'm done with pretty much showing anything. I just want to talk about the experience after all. This phone, after the Nexus, was pretty much the very first phone that got just about the same high quality custom ROM support. You can get pretty much whatever you want, lineage OS, carbon, or whatever you want to. And I personally should have gotten something else because I think something like carbon would have been a better fit for me, but I know a lot of people like lineages and it does the job just fine. There are a few little quirks about the OS, the custom ROM, that I don't like so much, but this still beats many custom UIs from Samsung, Sony and such, because you just get more options. It works very nice and fluid. It's super optimized because this is the thing. This phone, the system gets optimized by people who actually use the phone, who are very much into the whole tweaking thing. So they know to tweak a system way better than any company that just has to get out the release because they have to. Those people do this because they want to. They actually want to use the phone. And that is the thing. If you want a phone that ages very well, that you can use for multiple years in a row, like 4 or 5 years, I think you kind of have to use a phone like a Nexus, a Pixel, or something like a OnePlus in order to get great custom ROM support. Because I'm not quite sure where this phone is stuck at officially. I would say Android 6 if I'm not wrong. I think that was what was on it before I flashed it, which definitely is not that great. But as you can see with custom ROMs, you are on 8.1 with the newest security updates, and you are pretty much on a newer standard, on a newer level than most recently released phones, because even something like the Samsung Galaxy S9, which should be already out by now, is not on 8.1. So this is a phone that you want to get if you are maybe on a low budget. No, not anymore with the OnePlus, but if you would get this, people still buy this, I would actually say, and it still would work. Great software support, performance and everything else, which is nice to see. But what about the camera? I have to say, this is kind of the thing that especially on high-end phones has improved over time the most. So let's see what that's all about. Now, this phone is not using the OnePlus One camera app. It's using the Lineage OS app, and it's different. You definitely have to get used to this. You have quite a lot of options, as you can see here, HDR mode and Quest. So things work out a little bit different. It's a little bit of a different experience. Here you have so many options, way more than you have on pretty much any other phone. Because this, once again, this is made by geeks, and geeks want features, and they want it quickly and easily accessible. And with this phone, you actually get even 4K, which out of the box is not a thing. But let's check the actual quality. So here's the selfie cam, and I think most of, and my camera just, my mouse still works. And most phones these days even would be happy to have such a great camera. But of course, the focus at this distance is not fully right, but here, kind of the sweet spot, good distance, normally stretched arm, very sharp, nice colors. You definitely see that people who have tweaked this camera software know what they are doing, because these results are, even for these days standards, above a mid-range level. Because once you zoom in a little bit, you get that it's not that high res, and then it loses quality. But just for normal social media, this easily works out still, absolutely. And that is my surprised face when I saw them. Low light is a little bit something different, because I think this is where cameras improved the most. That was a thing that back then was quite bad, because you can see of how dark these pictures are. Not a whole lot of light gets picked up. I don't know what aperture we had back then, but it wasn't 1.7 or anything like that. Indoors actually still works out quite fine. The software does a good job. So of course it's grainy and it's not on a great level. But if you go outside, of course, the weather still wasn't best here in the winter. But autofocus worked quite good. A little bit on the slower times, I have to say. Autofocus in this app is a little bit something that you will just have to wait for. But then it works fine. Especially here, this picture, without HDR, boom. That is kind of almost creepy of how much brighter it got. It almost looks like I shot it at 2 completely different times, but I haven't. Smaller things in macro don't work that well, but normal objects, absolutely nice. Now let's check actually 4K, since I've mentioned that a little bit later on, a little bit earlier. I have to say something is weird about the camera experience here. Maybe it's the Lineage OS version, the camera version, or a bug of my phone, but autofocus was not a thing at all. I'm not quite sure. I think just something went wrong. I have no idea, because the video actually looks a little bit jittery also as well. The quality though is actually really nice. If we go a little bit closer in, you can see, yeah, not too shaky or anything. It works out good. But you will see indoors as well, or I mean on the front facing camera, something is off here. This is very, very jittery, very slow, very kind of, yeah, to forget. Microphone quality is actually also still quite good, but like I said, there is just something wrong with the front-facing camera. So I'd say we should just maybe ignore that and get not to the conclusion, which would be something that I do usually in my reviews, and this reminds me so much of it, but let's get back to the actual experience. No, the in-hand feel still these days would do just fine. The display, I think mostly what I didn't like so much is the calibration from Lineage OS system. I think I would need maybe a custom kernel to tweak it a little bit more properly. Some profiles would have been nice to get something with a little bit more contrast and a little bit something that isn't quite as cold but still nice to look at. But display's quality is good, is still. There are better phones by now, obviously, yes, and I'm very spoiled by these displays. But for someone who's on a tight budget, yeah, nice. Speaker also gets the job done. Headphone jack available and gets the job done. Performance, I cannot actually say it gets the job done. It's way better. Especially I think if you would use a ROM or just something that gets the scrolling back to a normal level with the same amount of friction as you, just so it's a little bit more something you are used to. Or maybe if you use Lineage OS long enough so you are used to it. This flies. Okay, apps maybe don't launch super fast and the app switching isn't perfect, because if you make a quick transition from one app to the other one, you see some frames getting dropped, but it's smooth. It gets the job done so nicely, and this is well above a mid-range level, which is surprising to see. Battery life, of course, I guess if this phone would be new or properly optimized and not have been used for 3 years, it would hold up longer, but it still holds long enough. Software, get whatever you want. Even though I'm maybe not 100% happy with Lineage OS, there is a ROM that will fit anyone. Just get the one you like the most and you are good to go. Camera, actually passable, absolutely. Okay, low light wasn't great, the front cam was a little bit wonky on my side for some reason, but normal pictures, just for daily use, why not? Because you can't expect this to hold up with flagships these days anymore. I think that's obvious, but I guess you can get this phone for around $100, maybe refurbished somewhere or just used. And this is way better than a Chinese imported phone for about 100, at least many. But yeah, I have to say, the challenge was very easy for me. I chose a very easy one. But to get back to the actual start, changing from something like a 5T that I used as my daily driver back to a One was not that bad at all. Yes, the OnePlus 5 feels nicer in hand, the display is nicer, the speaker is louder, the performance is even better, the battery life, obviously, the software I like a lot on this, it's my favorite OS, and the camera is way better. But 4 years apart, and you can get the same things done that you get with the 5T, just a little bit slower, just with a little bit of a lower end experience. A lower end experience on a high level, which sounds weird, but this video is getting around 18 minutes, which is usually the time that I finish my reviews in, but I would say that was it. If you have anything to comment, what you think of it, if I was cheating with such a kind of new phone, like I said, I didn't want to insult anyone with this being an old phone. Like I said, for someone who went through over 200 phones by the time he tried this one, it's old. But I enjoyed the time, and thanks again to Erica Griffin for the idea. It was something very different. I personally never go back to phones, and that's why I don't keep phones around. I know many people are nostalgic. I'm not sentimental at all. If I don't use something, I usually just have it somewhere lying because I'm too lazy to sell it, and then it just collects dust. But this is a phone that I could have just given anyone and he would have been perfectly fine with it. So that is nice to see. If the other participants of this challenge will have the same easy time that I had, I kind of doubt, because people who get a phone that is noticeably older than this, like at least 1 year plus, like we have seen on the other challenges, or that will come in the next few days and so on, they took real challenges, because I would actually call this like something like a self-induced torture, because because I actually had already trouble finding a micro SIM adapter from my nano SIM to get this work. But if I think about the HTC Desire that I have somewhere lying around in my house, I would have needed a normal SIM, which I have no idea where to get because I don't have these adapters. And that would have been worse because what had they in terms of display? I think 240p displays, 1 gigahertz processors, 1 gig of RAM would have been fine back then. It was like 512 maybe at best. Cameras were very crappy. So that's a completely different experience because there is a shift in time. I think everything before something like a Nexus 5, that's old. Everything with a lower than 480p screen, I would say. 720p, that is when the new times broke, and where I also have something like an HTC One X, which could still actually also be called a modern phone because 720p display on 4.7 inches, which back then I thought would have been something incredibly big, and I wanted the One S, but I thought, no, that's 4.7 inches, that's insanely big and so on, I won't ever get that, and now we have 6-inch, 6.5-inch phones and all that. And just thinking back about to that phone, which I wouldn't have personally used for this challenge because the battery life back then was at best 3 hours. So I'm not quite sure if that thing ever would have turned on if I would have gotten 1.5 hours out of it and not at all a new ROM. But if you get anything from a Nexus 5 with the great support and so on, you're actually good to go for even 1 or 2 years more. I don't think that will be an issue. And then you can move on to something better that you will keep on for the next 5 years, like the OnePlus 5T or something like that. But I definitely enjoyed my time. And yeah, thanks to everyone being part of the challenge. And also a little bit of a shout out definitely to my man or the guy, an amazing guy, some gadget guy, Juan Carlos Bagnell. I hope I didn't pronounce that too weirdly, but after all, everyone is pronouncing my last name wrong always. Anyways, and it's not Frank, it's actually Franz. But that's a different story for another time. I hope you enjoyed this video, which is now way too long. But hey, it's for fun, it's for my channel, and I can do whatever I want to, which is usually what I do. Okay, until next time, bye. 22 minutes. That was longer than expected, but much more fun than I expected. And I wasn't in the center of the frame once again, because I move way too much.